All right, welcome back to DTVC Extra. As always, this is Matt here, your host, and yeah, we're going to continue our look at the Predator franchise with the two Alien vs. Predator films. So both of these films come out one's in 2004, one's in 2007, but both come out between Predator 2 and Predators, right, which would be the next one in the series there. So I figured I would do both of these ones right here, and then I think in 2 weeks' time, we will do the three remaining ones in one episode. So I think that's probably, a lot of times I just do two per episode, but I guess I did do three on some of them. So that will be the plan there. So we'll do three per episode, or three for that final one. So we'll do Predators, The Predator, and Prey to finish up in 2 weeks. And then I'm not sure what the next franchise will be. I'm not sure what we'll look at, but we'll see. We'll kind of see what happens. Because I am enjoying doing these solo ones here every other week. The other thing too is that the solo ones, last week's Predator one was really well received, and so I think if I could find franchises that work that people are enjoying, I think Marvel Cinematic Universe, as much as I was enjoying going through those, I think people were a little marveled out when I went back to back there with Phase 1 and Phase 2. So we'll find something that kind of works in this vein here, that's kind of more in the Predator vein here. So we'll see what happens, but yeah. A couple of things I want to touch on from the last episode. One, I did record with John Cross after Movie Diner. We talked about Predator 2 as well. We went much more detail on Predator 2. And a couple of things I noticed. One, I did mention really the significance of Danny Glover being in Predator 2. That, there weren't a lot of African-American males playing big blockbuster leads at that time. And I think at that time, in his episode, I said, nobody, right? Because I was saying, Denzel Washington, Wesley Snipes, they hadn't gotten the big roles yet. Kind of forgot to mention Eddie Murphy, right, in the Beverly Hills Cop movies. Obviously, those were a big franchise in the 80s. So Danny Glover wasn't the first, but the fact that, he was used to playing supporting role to Mel Gibson and then got to be the lead in Predator 2 was significant. And that was something I didn't mention in the solo episode 2 weeks ago, but, John and I talked about on that episode. So I'm not sure when that episode's going to go live. I think he's in the process of editing now, because he does more editing than I do. I kind of just bang it out live and just see how we go. One of the things, it's like if I'm running out of breath, you can hear me breathe. I try to keep that to a minimum. But yeah, there's a lot of sounds and stuff like that you sometimes hear in the background with me, because I'm not really great at the whole editing process. Okay, so we fast forward to the year 2004. So it's been 14 years since we've had the Predator in any kind of film, release. Now, in that time, we have seen some other iterations, right? I remember in college, would have been probably the early 2000s. So maybe a few years before this film came out, maybe 3 or 4 years. My friends played an online game, Alien versus Predator. Where you could be a human, you could be an alien, you could be Predator, you could be like a face hugger. You could start as a face hugger and latch onto somebody and then grow into being an alien to fight people. And so that was it was an online game. They would have their two computers set up, but they would be playing other people online. So that was really, really popular from what I remember. That was a big one at the time as far as online kind of it was kind of in the mold of I remember GoldenEye, the N64. Game, or as my friends called it, the N69, because we were really funny like that. That James Bond game that was really popular. It was kind of similar in that vein. So there was that. I think the comic books had kind of grown a little bit. There was other media. Capcom had an Alien versus Predator game, so it was building steam there. So despite the fact that we weren't getting anything else from the Predator, there was a sense that something would be coming at some point. At the same time, Alien was still moving forward, right? Because you remember, what was it? Alien Resurrection that came out in 1997. And one of the things I read was that Alien versus Predator was something that they were starting to develop as recent as or as soon as maybe a year or so after Predator 2 came out. So there was a thought that they could do this. I remember the comic book came out before Predator 2, and there's sort of a nod to the comic in Predator 2 where they show the alien skull. So there was a sense that they wanted to do this, but there was also a sense that they weren't sure how they were going to do it, right? Because these producers would have the rights to these properties. It's kind of different from how it is now, where the studios really own the properties and they decide what happens with them. At that time, you still see that now with producers having the rights to properties. Like, for example, Rocky. That's where we're seeing the big issues with Rocky, is that there are producers that own the rights to that as opposed to Stallone. And so Stallone's almost been effectively written out of that with the Creed 3 movie. And he's like trying to sort of reassert his rights there. So that was the issue, right? Is that you had producers that had the rights to Predator, that had the rights to Alien. Also, when they were making Alien or Alien Resurrection, they didn't really want to step on that with Alien versus Predator. But I think there was also a sense that the popularity was there and that the desire was there to have a movie like this. And so they went to work and started making it. It came out in 2004, and it did really well. I mean, it won its weekend. I think it's out of all of these movies, it's the only one I saw in the theater. My friends and I went right away to catch it because I think we were all interested to see what this was going to be about. To be frank, I'm not as up on the Alien films. I saw the first three. The first two, of course, those are ones when you're growing up in the 80s, you don't really have any choice. You have to see those movies. And then when Alien 3 came out, right, we joked and called it Alien Cubed because of the way that they wrote the 3. That was kind of the start of a time when you couldn't just, when people were just getting sick of just writing numbers for sequels, they had to start doing it in cute little ways. And so there was Alien Cubed, right? So that was, we would joke about that. We thought we were funny. I saw that one, and then I haven't seen an Alien movie yet. I haven't seen one since then. And there was talk actually that Cameron was working on another Alien film when he heard that they were developing this one, and that turned him off from the idea of developing that Alien film. He essentially called this movie like, Frankenstein versus the werewolf, from old, Universal days. And he saw that as kind of, it was like a kind of a money grab, but some kind of this cheap, tawdry crossover thing, and not the kind of fun thing that fans would have been clamoring for. The other thing I realized too, again, most of my friends were Predator fans. I had a few like real sci-fi and horror fans that were more into Alien than Predator, but most were Predator fans. And of course, we all wanted to see this movie, right? We were all interested in the concept of this because as Predator fans, it just seems like the coolest thing you could do. I never considered it kind of more from the other side, as Alien fans, that this would be kind of seen as like kind of a cheap, like, I don't know, money grab kind of thing that doesn't really fit in the rest of how those Alien movies work. Because the Alien movies are a little different from the Predator movies. I mean, the Predator movies are just sort of out and out. The first two, if you think of Predator and Predator 2, they're out and out bonkers action films that for us as action fans is beautiful, right? We love that kind of bonkers actionness. But the Alien movies are more like kind of horror and sci-fi, and I think I don't want to say they're more sophisticated. I don't know if that's the right term I want to use for it, but fans of those movies aren't always going to cross over into the schlock action vein that we enjoy, that we love. I mean, it does take a certain person to be able to enjoy, Danny Glover crashing through a shootout in the middle of this kind of like dystopian-esque LA while these cartel guys are running through a building and stuffing coke up their nose at the same time they're shooting at things, and then a predator comes and kills them all, right? It's probably not for everyone. And so in reading about this and how this movie came to be, that's one thing I never considered, but it makes sense that if you're an Alien fan, you might not have been as interested in this as us Predator fans were. And yeah, I mean, and the other thing too, of course, is that if you were an Alien fan, you didn't go as long without a movie as we did, right? And so that's another piece of this. Alien Resurrection comes out in 97, I believe. And so, I mean, I'm thinking about that one. That was like when I was in high school. I was graduating high school in 97. And so, I think Alien Cubed came out in 93. I probably should have had all the Alien ones up before. I actually considered watching them all again, all the Aliens, and try to catching up on those because there was a sense that I was missing some. So actually, Alien Cubed came out in 92. So Alien Cube or Alien 3 or whatever. So there was a sense that maybe I should watch them again and get caught up on at least some of what would have led up to these movies, because even though the Alien versus Predator films aren't considered canon, and Ridley Scott, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, Ridley Scott kind of, like, they use the term in it was Wikipedia or IMDb trivia of decanonize. I I guess that's a thing, that Ridley Scott effectively decanonized these two movies that we're going to talk about. He had no desire. He didn't even watch them. He wanted nothing to do with them. James Cameron, to his credit, when he sees this first movie, he actually really likes it. He put it as his third favorite amongst the Alien series, which is interesting, right? Because you think about how many movies were there. I mean, would that make it? He thinks Alien and Alien 2 or Aliens, sorry, Alien and Aliens are his. Are 1 and 2, and then this is right after that. That would be interesting, right? If that's kind of how he feels about it. I don't know. I mean, for me, right? So, Chris, I've only seen up through Alien Cubed. So for me, I would definitely put this. I'd put this one above Alien Cubed. I remember we watched that one. I want to say we saw that one in the theater, my friends and I. Well, no, because it came out in '92, so I think that would have been a little bit early for me. Yeah, because I would have been 13 at that time, so that would have been a little early for us to go see something like that in the theater. I think we rented it after the fact, but yeah, I don't remember. I mean, I remember being in the theater. I remember the ads and stuff for it. I mean, I should watch it again. It's been forever since I've seen it. I mean, it may have been. I mean, I probably saw it in like the mid '90s, so it may have been some 30 years now since I've seen it. So I probably could use another. I mean, it's probably the same with all of them, right? I'm thinking about like the Alien and Aliens. I would have seen those in like the late '80s and haven't seen them since. It was kind of one of those deals where it was like I got them over with in a sense. I mean, I liked them. I really liked the movies, but again, there's a sense growing up in the '80s. There's certain movies that you have to have watched, and if you haven't watched them, you have to turn in your card. So I can't name them all off the top of my head, but I mean, you can think of some of the classics, right? You can think of Ghostbusters, right? If you haven't seen Ghostbusters, there's a problem, right? And I think anybody who's my age, who's listening to this, and you haven't seen Ghostbusters, you probably should go out and watch it. Obviously Predator, Terminator, those are ones. Aliens, those are ones we talked about here. Something like an E.T., the Star Wars movies from there's a chunk of them, right? And it's like if you haven't seen them, Blade Runner, stuff like that. It's like you haven't, so. This the Alien ones fall into that category, but I don't know. I never had a desire to watch them again, and I probably should. They're all on Hulu. I think one of the more recent ones isn't on Hulu, but for the most part, they're all on Hulu. So, we'll see. But what happens is that when Ridley Scott does his prequels, like Prometheus, he essentially erases what would have been what these movies do, because these movies are essentially, right, the way that the Alien versus Predator films work is that they're sequels to Predator and Predator 2, and they're prequels to the Alien films. At least that's what they tried to position themselves as. And then I guess Ridley Scott got the go-ahead from Fox to erase these from the canon, as they said. I don't know if it was IMDb or Wikipedia that used the term canonicity, so that the canonicity of these films is disputed. And one thing that's interesting, I guess, is that the Predator franchise has not said either way if these films are within the canon of the storylines or not, but they've used elements of them in their movies. So I think it would be kind of a fun thing to do. It does, it is an interesting thing. As we talk about this first one here, it does call into question some of the elements that we get in the very first movie, the first Predator film, based on what this movie does for its history. So why don't we'll get stuck in here on a quick plot exposition here, and then or plot description. And then, then we'll kind of dig in on the film here, talk about what I liked about it, some of the things that maybe I did or didn't like, and that kind of thing. So the basic story here is that we've got Lance Henriksen, who is his character name is Wayland. It's Bishop Wayland, Charles Bishop Wayland, with the idea being, right, that the bishop android would be based on him, right? Because of course he plays that part in Alien. Right, he's a billionaire, and his satellite picks up a heat signature in Antarctica, and it looks like it's like a pyramid. It's based off a pyramid. So he gathers up a team. He's got actor Raul Bova, played by Sebastian De Rosa. Sebastian De Rosa is the character that Raul Bova is playing. He's like an expert on Aztec. I guess Aztec or Mayan. I don't something, but definitely expert on he's sort of an archaeologist who's an expert on that kind of thing. Sanaa Lathan plays Alexa Woods, who's an expert on Antarctic expeditions and mountain expeditions. So the idea is that Henriksen wants him to be able to go into this pyramid and explore it and tell him, get whatever important things out of it. And that Sanaa Lathan, of course, would be the one who would guide them on this expedition. And of course, he's got a big team of a bunch of other people. He's got Tommy Flanagan's there, Ewan Bremmer's there, Colin Salmon, actress Agatha De La Boulia, Boulay, who you'll see whenever you go to the IMDb page. She's the one who shows up with kind of the spiky blonde hair. And then Karsten Norgard is also, he's like kind of the guy who's supposed to be drilling a hole in the ice. And so what happens is they make their way to where this heat signature is, and it's like underneath an old like whaling outpost or something from like 100 years before, from like 1904. And as they're getting to the whaling outpost, they notice that there's a huge hole because the predators are in the area, right? And they've kind of flown in with their ship, and they just shoot a big laser from outer space, and it bores a hole all the way down to where the pyramid is through the ice down there. It's like 2,000 feet down. So the idea is that they're going to kind of climb down there and then investigate this temple. And as they're kind of figuring it out, right, the predator shows up. We see some things as us, as learned or understood viewers that point us into the direction of maybe, some alien kind of activity. We see the characters, or we see these sort of sacrificial human remains that are laying in a circle on these slabs. It looks very much like in I think the first Alien, right, where they're in the capsules that are kind of laid out in a similar way. So you get these little breadcrumbs, right? And what ends up happening is, of course, because humans are dumb and we always get in the way in this crap and we screw things up. As Sebastian de Rosa, the archaeologist, is exploring things and looking around, he notices, based on his understanding of ancient history, he's able to read. I don't know if I'm saying he's reading Predator. I think it's like in hieroglyphs that they kind of invented, but he was able to figure it out. They're able to open up some of the chambers, and they see these really cool guns, these cool Predator guns, and they pull the guns, and it sets off the whole chain where we get this big alien queen who's like being kept in ice, which it seems like a pretty rough deal to be doing. I mean, I understand the aliens are supposed to be like rough monsters and stuff like that, but for me, of course, as someone who I do. Yes, I do still eat meat, so I guess I'm not the most nicest person, but it just seems like a rough deal to be keeping this poor alien queen chained up and in like frozen, in ice or whatever, and then like bringing her up every 100 years or so to lay some alien eggs or whatever. But we also get 3 predators who show up, right? And they realize that something's amiss when they get down there. But the thing is, the way it works is they've got to get their guns from the chamber, and that's what's supposed to set everything off. So the fact that these humans have taken the guns screws the whole thing up. So the other thing with this pyramid is because it's meant to be a hunting game, a training game for the predators, it's set up like a maze. So it's constantly shifting and moving and everything. And so this is it, right? Now we've got these 3 predators show up. 2 of them get killed almost right away. So we've got a 3rd predator who's kind of trying to do his best to kind of tamp down this alien infestation. And, if he's got to kill some humans to do it, all the better. And that's when Sanaa Lathan comes in. She's sort of like our heroine here, and she's the one who teams up with the predator. They try their best to get out alive, and they kind of make it to the surface. There's a final fight with the queen. He does blow up the pyramid first. That predator, he uses that same kind of wrist bomb thing, but he just throws it aside and blows up all the aliens that are in there. And then at the surface, he has a showdown with the queen. Sanaa Lathan's able to help him take the queen out, and he dies in that fight. The other predators show up and they take him away. They give her a staff that she can use, a sort of a parting gift, the way that Danny Glover got a parting gift as well. And that's it. That's kind of our movie, except the fact that when we get on the ship, we get a tease for the next movie, right? Because a little alien pops out, because there's a sort of a Chekhov's face hugger that happens when the one predator is taking out all the aliens that killed his 2 buddies. He's doing a pretty good job until he gets face hugged, and then we don't really hear anything about the face hugging for a while. But it's Chekhov's face hug, right? You can't face hug somebody in the second act and not use it by the end of the final act. And so there he is on the plane, and the baby alien predator pops out of his chest in that last final stinger scene there. So this movie, I mean, I had fun with it. I think that's the ultimate thing, right? Is that you want to have fun with something like this. I don't know if you were going to tell me, if I was going to wait 14 years for Alien versus Predator, because that's essentially what it was, right? We were waiting this long for Alien versus Predator. If I was going to wait this long for it, if this was the movie that I would get, that I would want, I think the one thing is that they were trying to do something similar to the previous movies, where they wanted to delay the introduction of the Predators and Aliens and kind of have it be like a sort of a build up to that kind of thing. And I get that. So the director and writer was Paul W.S. Anderson, who, of course, we know him from all kinds of stuff, right? I mean, he's Death Race, I think, is probably one more recent one. I don't know if I covered that Death Race or just some of his other ones. But he did the Resident Evil movies. He actually right. When you look him up, it starts with writer, and he gets writer credits for the Death Race movies, because he wrote those he wrote the first one, and then they went from Statham to Luke Goss, right, in the sequels. But yeah, I mean, he does the Resident Evil movies, Three Musketeer movies. That's kind of his deal, right? Soldier, of course, Event Horizon. I remember a lot of friends who were big into Event Horizon, and I think that's probably something that probably led people to believe this might be a little. For Alien fans, it might have made them give it a try. Is that Event Horizon is one that I think Alien fans enjoy, and that one, I think they maybe thought, okay, that could be something that we're getting here. The thing is, right, is that because Anderson was more of a fan of the Alien franchise than the Predator franchise, he slants it a little bit in that direction, where it seems like the aliens are much harder to stop. But I don't know. I thought that was a little bit more organic too, in the sense that, like, they don't have their weapons yet. These are also 3 inexperienced predators who are sort of like doing this ritual here to become experienced predators. So they wouldn't have as great, they wouldn't have as easy a time fighting the aliens, I don't think. So there's that part too. But it definitely, it does feel like, if he's picking sides here, right, he's saying the aliens are more badass than the Predator, for sure. But I think if it was the movie that I would have wanted, if you were going to ask me, might not have humans in it at all. I think I would have just want predators going to a planet and there's aliens there and they fight them. And that, predators are themselves the protagonists. And I get, like, the issues that you'd have with that, right? Like the language part of it. They wouldn't be speaking in English. We wouldn't be, it's almost like this feeling of, like, you have to have humans in a movie like that. And it's interesting, right? Because you look at, like, a lot of the old Godzilla movies, where he'd be fighting other creatures, or the Gamera movies. And of course now, think of how popular, like, Godzilla versus Kong is and stuff like that we like that kind of thing. And on all those, right, you usually have human characters that are involved in the process and kind of are sort of the collateral damage, right? But that we sort of identify and root for those characters. But I think I would have liked it better without any humans in it. I think I would like if they're ever going to do another Predator versus Alien, which I don't know that they will. I get the sense that Ridley Scott's sensibilities were so harmed by the concept of this that now I don't know what's happening now that Disney owns the rights to Alien. I don't know if how that would work. If they would be like, oh, well, yeah, you gotta, if I don't know if they'd be like, well, this is what we're doing, so you got to just deal with it, Mr. Scott, and you can make your own movies after or something. I don't know for sure, but I think if they want to keep him happy and making movies for them, I think they probably wouldn't. I don't think they would do that, because again, he does not like the idea of these movies, and he did it much as he could to erase the concept of them when he started making his prequels after the fact. One thing I did like about this was with Sanaa Lathan. I really liked Sanaa Lathan in the lead. And of course, when this movie comes out in 2004, I wouldn't have thought, like, okay, Sanaa Lathan's more of a dramatic actress or actor, and does more dramatic parts. That's what she's known for. But I always liked her, and I always liked her work, and so I was excited to see her here. It's interesting, if you go to her IMDb page, this is the first, there's always that 4 box of, like, movies, their top 4 movies, and this is her top 1, Alien versus Predator. It's one of those reasons why I think why actors want to do these blockbusters, is because no matter how it goes, one way or the other, it's always going to be that one of your top movies when you go to IMDb. It's going to be one that you're most known for, right? It's like any of the ones who are in the Fantastic Four movies. That's usually, if you go to their page, that's like one of the first things that you see under their name. But one thing I did like here is that, one of the things about Predator, And I don't know if I can say the same for Aliens because I don't know that franchise as well. Like I said, it's been 30 years since I've seen any Alien movie, as far as I can tell. But with the Predator franchise, a lot of times it's sort of taking horror conventions and mixing them with action, but also mixing with action in a way that sort of flips the horror conventions a little bit. And with Sanaa Lathan, there's almost like a final girl aspect to her character. But then when you take the action element of it, right, of the final girl piece, it works really well because, when she becomes an agent in her own escape, her own, success, or her, her own survival, right? And when she's teaming up with the Predator to fight, there's something about it that just works really well. And again, just takes that whole trope of the final girl and just sort of flips it on its ear and makes it into something different. I don't know if toxic's the right word. There's always something when I watch horror movies with the whole final girl thing where it's like almost like these directors that like just want to put some woman through the ringer and then when she survives make it sound like, oh, I'm Mr. Feminist. I really, really like women and all that stuff. I don't have any issues with them, but yet they put them through the ringer for these movies, right? This is different, right? This is, she's not really put through the ringer necessarily. I mean, she's really going for it. She did say the hardest part for her as an actress was that she had to be scared all the time because, I mean, the thing is, right, is that these characters have not seen any of these before. They don't know who the Predator is because, that would have probably been kept secret or something from them. And, of course, this is the first interactions that humans have with aliens. So, she does have to be scared. No matter how tough her character is, that would be freaky, We get introduced to her character. She's ice climbing in Thailand, and the funny thing is she gets a phone call from Lance Hendrickson, wanting her to join the mission. And then of course she gets to or I don't know if it was Lance Hendrickson that calls her, or like she gets to the summit and it's Colin Salmon. When she gets up to the top there, or if like I can't remember, but she meets Colin Salmon at the top, but he takes a helicopter there and takes her back. But, at that time I'd never been ice climbing before. This was 2004. Since then I have done ice climbing. And I would say I don't see myself ever answering a phone call while I'm ice climbing. I can't imagine doing that. But, I don't know if that's maybe supposed to make her character more badass. I mean, I think it's badass that you don't answer your call while you're ice climbing. But that's the thing with her character is that she is like, it's I think Paul Anderson pulls some kind of Ripley vibes from her, but then also there is some of the Schwarzenegger, Danny Glover vibes as well in here in this character, and I just thought I was really great. She's a really great lead for this, and it works really well. I also think too when you're looking at the tradition of the tradition of Predator leads, right, where you've got Schwarzenegger as the lead in the first one, then you've got, a person of color, an African-American male leading the second one, which was not really done as much at that time, and then to have an African-American woman play the lead in the third one, which this movie is effectively the third Predator film. I thought it was a really great way to continue that tradition and keep that kind of that diversity and openness there and doing things that you don't normally do in action movies, that, sort of removing the standards that we're used to having. So I thought that was a really great way to do that. And I really thought that was cool. Now, beyond the idea about the story of this. So the backstory that our archaeologist tells us is that essentially all of our technology is from the Predator. So I don't think Ancient Aliens was a show at this time, right? I can't remember when Ancient Aliens. I don't think it was a show in 2004, right? I mean, it was an old one. It's funny, right? Because it's the History Channel, like watching the evolution of the History Channel into these kinds of shows. And I remember my friend and I we watched what was it? I was helping him move, and we watched a marathon of Ancient Aliens. So it looks like Ancient Aliens was 2009, I think. I think that's when it started. So it was a little bit after this. I love the idea though, because essentially, without saying it, this movie is essentially saying that the Predator or the Predators, they're the Anunnaki, right? That they're the ones who give us all of our technology. That idea of the Anunnaki who create these pyramids and give us everything that we, for civilization and all of that. essentially they're saying the predators were the ones who did that. That pyramids were created. They gave us technology, civilization. We worship them as gods, and then they would come and the sacrifices that we know of, especially the Aztec sacrifices where they're pulling people out of cutting out people's hearts and stuff like that. Well, actually, no, those sacrifices were people getting face hugged and having aliens pop out of them so that the predators can do these rituals. The thing about that idea that there's been a history of thousands of years of predator intervention or predators, coming here, it makes that the first movie seem a little weird then, because it's almost like the predator is kind of figuring out our world when he's here. But maybe not. But that's what it kind of feels like. Now, granted, you could make the case, right, that if the predators have been coming here for thousands of years, that when they first were coming, they wouldn't have seen us as much of a threat, right? I mean, if the best we've got is like bows and arrows and atlatls and spears, like they're probably gonna laugh at that, right? Their technology is so much more advanced than that there's really no way that you'd be able to take a predator down if you were our ancient food foraging ancestors. So there's that piece of it, that maybe as we got more we progressed in our technology, they started to see us as a better hunt, right? A more worthy hunt, and they decided to start hunting us. That's one idea, right? And the other idea is it just doesn't, they just sort of rewriting it on the fly, and it's just something new. And so that's another way, right? That again, as much as this movie was trying to fit in with those previous movies, canon was not the kind of thing that we think of it today, right? You think of like the Highlander movies, right? Or, things like that, where you just, you do the first Highlander movie, you do the second Highlander movie that, because the first Highlander movie, Lambert wins. So the second Highlander movie, you kind of have some Planet Geist, and then you do a third Highlander movie that acts like the second Highlander movie didn't exist, right? And then you do a whole separate, timeline where the events in the first movie happen, except it's not the end, right? And that's when you can get Duncan MacLeod in, and he's fighting other immortals, and it's still happening and all that stuff. So, canon was not what we think of it now, where it's like, okay, if something happens, it's got to either exist in this timeline or it doesn't. You could kind of fudge things. And so I think they could look at the first movie and say, yeah, maybe it seemed like the Predator was his first time visiting Earth, maybe not, or maybe the first time Predators were, they could look at it one way or the other. But you do kind of feel like if ancient humans were dealing with predators for millennia, right, that they would, you would have like drawings and things like that you could draw from, and then you'd have like people like Gary Busey, who were investigating the Predator in the second Predator movie, would have been like, oh, look at this, throughout history, humans have been interacting with predators, and look at all these pictures and stuff like that. So it is a little bit hard to square this idea of the predators as the Anunnaki with sort of the previous two movies, at least for me. That seemed a little bit harder to handle. But, it's an interesting concept, right? It's an interesting idea. The idea that all of our pyramids, right, were built by the predators. The predators had, I guess they had our ancient civilizations building those pyramids. It's like one of those things where, like, when the archaeologist is looking at the pyramid, and Lance Hendrickson's like, oh, looks like it could be, is it, Cambodian or Aztec, and he's like, it's all of them. It's all, right, it's like that big reveal. Oh boy, it's it's the origin of the pyramids, right? That kind of thing. And again, I guess, Ancient Aliens, right, comes out in like 2009, but I guess this kind of stuff was hanging around. I mean, who knows? Maybe Paul Anderson, he's up late at night, writing scripts, he's listening to Art Bell, right? Remember Art Bell, Coast to Coast at that time? Like, I had a friend who loved that stuff because he's got such a big kick out of it. He thought it was hilarious, and so we would listen to Art Bell. And they have like the UFO sighting people in it, and then you'd have like the debunkers. I want to say, I think this guy was named like Cal Korff or something like that, who was a debunker, and I guess he like said something about Art Bell being a fraud or something, and Art Bell called and like left this nasty message on the machine and like recorded it and played it for his radio audience, which my buddy and I just loved that stuff. It was just, we ate that up. But I actually created a character, like he's like a UFO sighting kind of guy, in my most recent novel, Don's House in the Mountains, if you read that. There's a character named Milton who writes about being abducted by aliens, and he goes on shows. The name I gave was Art Balsam, because I used to always, when my buddy and I would talk about it, I would be like, oh, let's listen to Art Balsam tonight. He's like, it's Art Bell. And I don't know. I think the only reason why I called him Art Balsam, I think, was because I used to watch Mitchell a lot, the MST3K Mitchell, and you had Martin Balsam in that. And so I think that's why I called him Art Balsam. But anyway, that was the name I used, that the character was doing the Art Balsam show. But yeah, he's like living out of a van and stuff like that. And he's like talking about his alien abductions and all that stuff. But he goes to like book fairs selling his alien abduction books that he writes. So that was the idea, that character is kind of based off of that experience that I had with my friend. And I mean, this would have been like, for us, it would have been like late 90s that we would have been listening to that. I mean, it was, I think we could stream it. I think you could stream it on the computer at that time. Even back then, I think it was kind of a new thing that you could do at that time. I know you could at least play clips from the show. But maybe we did get it on one of the radio stations, maybe like one of the Bangor area radio stations, because I was going to University of Maine at that time. So, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be beyond the pale, right, for Paul W.S. Anderson to be listening to Art Bell and like hearing all of these crazy theories about aliens that like gave us all our technology and stuff like that, to want to do this. Now, there's another side of this kind of storytelling, or this kind of idea that aliens gave us all our technology, and that other side of it is this idea. It's sort of like a more racist kind of basis for it, where it's like, well, I mean, there's no way these civilizations could have been advanced enough to create their own pyramids, because they're not from Western European civilizations. So why would they have the ability to make those? And I think that part of it is a little frustrating. And I think this movie wouldn't have had the range to be getting into ideas like that or talking about things like that. I don't even think it would have known it was doing that when it did it. But it's that idea that, like, well, Aztecs, right? The First Nations people that were living in central Mexico at that time. This idea that they wouldn't have been able to create their own pyramids, or that they wouldn't even be able to create their own religion, where they were the ones making the sacrifices, right? That it would somehow have to be the predators wanting them to do that. That is an element there that I think we're more conscious of it today than we were 20 years ago. But it is an important element of this too, that I think when you do that kind of storytelling, that idea that like ancient peoples, that especially ones that aren't Western European ancient peoples, weren't capable of great things, right? That they weren't capable of great engineering, of building massive, pyramids and massive structures. That idea of that is something that I think is very pervasive, and especially in our Western society, that I think we should be more cognizant of it. And again, I don't know that this movie was necessarily, this movie was just working in that vein, maybe without even knowing that they were working in that vein. But it is something I think to consider. And again, because you're looking at two sides of, two different things happening here, because you have an African-American woman as the lead, right, who ultimately is the one who prevails over the predators, the aliens, and everybody. She's the one who survives and makes it out of this alive. So, I'm not calling the film racist or anything like that. I'm saying that it's just that there's like that trope there that is based in racism that we see a lot. And I think, it's kind of this whole thing that Ancient Aliens is based off of, that I think we don't necessarily look enough at how insulting that could be for, the peoples that it's talking about, the descendants of those people it's talking about in particular. So it's an interesting element. I don't think I needed any of that. I didn't need any of that idea that the predators were the Anunnaki. Again, it's funny. Again, if you're listening to Art Bell at 2 a.m. while you're writing your scripts, or, doing your storyboards for your directing, stuff like that, and you just get this crazy Grinchy idea to do it, I totally understand. It makes total sense. But it is kind of an interesting concept. Now, where this film starts to kind of play in as a prequel, right? Obviously, right away, right? We know the prequel element to it because we know the prequel element to it is that Hendrickson is playing Charles Bishop Wayland, right? And we know it's the Wayland is one half of the corporation, right? That forms, that sends our the Nostromo out on its fateful mission, and so that's the one piece of it, right? This idea that like this is kind of the start of what gets us there, 100 years in the future when we get to the alien, or we get to the actual alien films. This is sort of like the seed that's planted there that starts us there, which I think is an interesting idea. And I like Henriksen in this role, right? He's great as this kind of guy with his kind of gruff, deep voice, playing the billionaire. He's sick. He's close to dying, and so he's like, but he wants to be there on the mission. And Sanaa Lathan's like, I don't know if I want to take you on this mission, but then it's like, okay, And it's interesting too because she turns him down when he wants her to go on the mission because she's like, I can't take you people out here on this mission when you're not trained to be walking in the ice like this. This is dangerous stuff out here in Antarctica, which is true, right? I mean, I don't think, my buddy, though my buddy did take me on an ice climbing thing. He got my experience with him confused with his wife's experience climbing with him. And we did this ice climb up the Huntington's Ravine Trail on Mount Washington, and I had some trouble with it. And then we had this spin drift come down, and my gloves got covered in snow when I was trying to get an ice bolt out or something like that. And so we had to abandon the whole thing. I think I lost my ice axe and all of that. And he ended up losing a couple ice crews. We had bailed on it, and he was like, "Oh, I didn't know you had trouble with that. Didn't we do that?" And I was like, "No, I don't remember doing that with you. I think it was the taking out the ice crews or something like that." And he was like, "I thought we did that." And I was like, I don't think so. And then it turned out that, he's like, oh, that's right. I took my wife on a different trip and we did that. So, but anyway, it does take a lot of training to do this kind of thing. And she's like, I don't want to take these people out there. And then, Sebastian De Rosa, the archaeologist, and then of course, Ewan Bremer, who plays Graham Miller, who's, another, I guess he's another archaeologist or another expert. They're like, well, are our chances better with you or without you, kind of thing? Because we're all going, right? We're all going to do this. This is a chance of a lifetime. She's like, okay, fine, I'll take you. And so then, so she's not really swayed by the billionaire, but she's more swayed by them as fellow experts in wanting to see them achieve that. The other thing, of course, is that, because she's like, it's not worth it if you're going to die to be going to do this. And she's telling this story about how when she was hiking Mount Rainier with her dad, he breaks his leg, but he still needed to get to the summit. So they get to the summit and then come back, and he gets a blood clot and he dies, or whatever. And Lance Henriksen's like, well, what do you think his last memory was? Wishing he hadn't gotten to the summit or having champagne with you on the summit of Rainier. And it's like, Rainier's not. I've never done Rainier. Some of my friends, that friend that I did ice, went ice climbing with, he did Rainier, and Rainier is not so remote or difficult that you wouldn't have another shot at it if you broke your leg. You know what I mean? It's not like this is it's not like you're up at K2 or something that's this is our only chance we're gonna have up here to do this. Let's get to the summit and then we'll worry about the rest later. It's no, we just did Rainier, we can do Rainier next year when your leg's healed and everything's ready. It's not like it's not going to be there to do it again. And so it is a weird idea that's what her dad dies is because he's I can't not do Rainier. I don't know, it was an interesting idea that they had that in there. But anyway, it did, it was fun seeing the ice climbing aspect of this and seeing her ice climb and that part of it, was interesting, right? It kind of, added to this sort of remote area or this remote location of it. And that part of it I kind of enjoyed. I kind of enjoyed this sort of underground pyramid that's, sort of out in the middle of nowhere there or whatever. And it was also, there was something about it that was very Predator, that the Predators would just decide to let aliens loose, and if they win, they win, and if they lose, they blow the whole thing up, and devil take the hindmost. There's something very Predator about that, which I really liked. The Predators themselves kind of seem almost like this, I don't know, rough and tumble group of guys that just kind of just get after it, and you almost kind of feel right, if you hang out with them, right, they're the ones who are I don't know, and I don't know if you can hear kids outside screaming. It's letting kids out from school time. And so I don't know how that works with the parents here. And I guess, me not having any kids, I don't know myself, but there's a sense of okay, we're letting the kids out from school. From the parent standpoint, there isn't a sense of well, we need to get the kids in the car and go home. There's a sense of, I want to talk to other parents. And I am so, how do I say it? Immune to my kids screaming, that I don't hear them screaming while they're out here. I'm just talking to this other person about whatever random crap that we talk about as parents. While we, who live in the buildings, because, again, this is South Philadelphia, where we're all in apartments and, row houses and all of that. So there's a lot of us kind of stacked on each other. We were just sitting here, just listening to this kid just screaming outside. So it's a very nice thing. It's one of the great things about living near a charter school for sure. But anyway, back to the predators, right? There's that sort of that sense that they're like they're those guys that like if you hang out with them, right? That they don't really care if you get left behind someplace. They don't care if that you need to be home for a certain reason. They don't care that you're out of money. They don't care that they're tearing places apart, breaking things. That they're those guys that you don't, that when you're hanging out with them, you're like, oh man, how did I get stuck with these guys? You're trying to get away maybe. They're the ones that, there's a fear of maybe getting arrested when you're hanging out with them. They're kind of like that on like this great massive scale, and it's interesting too because we only ever get the hunter predators, right? That's why we call them predators, right? We only get that crew, and it does seem like there's a huge amount of culture that's built up around hunting for them, right? You could almost say like hunting would be like, I don't know, for us in America, like obviously in the United States, like the NFL, right, where people just love the NFL, and there's this huge like whole ecosystem based around it, right? Where you're either training kids to play football and make it that far into the NFL. There's the whole coaching, college system, all of that. But then there's also things like fantasy football, betting, the TV shows and all of that. It's almost like hunting for the predators, right? Is like that kind of thing. It would be interesting if we got a sense of the other predators, right? The other people in their society. Because one, for example, with all this technology that they have, there has to be like engineers and non-hunting predators out there that is designing all of this stuff, right? And an interesting idea that I thought about. So when I studied anthropology in school, so I had my degree is in anthropology, which of course is great because you can use it for just about nothing. But that was my degree, was in anthropology. And, we studied, Anthropology 101, you study kind of the history of humankind. And they do a lot of sort of ethnographies on the, food foraging cultures in Africa that are kind of the closest thing to, our pre-farming ancestors, right? For, 99.9% of our time as humans, we were food foragers, right? You'd have like the women in the band who would forage for like either grubs or root vegetables or, other proteins or maybe like small little animals and things like that. They would usually be caring with the kids, and then the males would go out and hunt. And so like the hunting, even though it didn't provide as much sustenance as the others, the food foraging did, it was like a very public thing, right? Because, what are you going to do if you kill an elephant or even like a boar or an antelope, right? You can't eat all of that in a 20 or 30 person group, right? You need to share that with the other bands in the area because, you can't take it with you. I mean, what are you going to take rotting, stinking meat with you on a 20-mile hike? I mean, you can't, you got to eat it. It's got to be eaten. So it's a very communal and public thing. And one of the things our ancestors did was they had a few different techniques that they did that would try to keep the hunters who were successful from having a big head. One of them was called insulting the meat. And an anthropologist who was doing an ethnography on a food foraging group, or a food foraging society, he bought them a boar, I think, that was like slaughtered and everything. And he noticed as they were eating it that they were complaining. They were like, oh, this is really tough. I can hardly chew this and all this stuff. And he's like, this is like the best thing I could have bought, right? I mean, he was eating. He's like, everything's fine. We discovered that that's part of the process, right? Is that when a hunter kills an animal, everybody talks about how horrible it is so that person doesn't get a big head. The other thing was that so hunters wouldn't become like the most popular people in the society. They had this other thing where people who weren't maybe good hunters, but would design arrows and things like that. The person who designed the arrow would get credit for the kill as opposed to the actual hunter, which I think would be a really great idea, right? You do a Predator movie based off of an engineer who designs the weapons, and he gets the credit. I'm saying he, it could be a woman as well. I don't, it's our gender with predators too. We don't necessarily know. We seem to only see males, but we don't know for sure. But that that engineer gets the credit for the kill. I also, just going back to anthropology, I think it would be really cool to have predator anthropologists, right? And even like maybe like them having like a huge debate over the ethics of being invisible, right? When you're studying other societies, right? Because, from an anthropological perspective, right, it would be considered unethical. You wouldn't do it, right? You wouldn't just watch a people in secret. And I know when I would tell people that when I was, talking about going to school for anthropology, and I would talk about what ethnography was and all of that kind of thing, they'd be like, well, don't you want them to not isn't it better for them to not know you're studying them, because then you get to see really what they're about? And it's like, well, no, one, you shouldn't be spying on people, right? That's just not that beyond being unethical, right? It's wrong, it's creepy, it's not a good thing. But also, when somebody welcomes you into their society and wants to show you their society, maybe, yes, to start with, they show you the only good things, but eventually they will show you the bad things. Or, when you go to a bar, right? There's some rah-rah Americans who are like, oh, America's great, it's the greatest thing ever. But usually, if you go to a bar, if you're from outside the country, there are people that will talk to you and be frank with you about how America is and things like that. And so, you get to learn better that way. But it's more ethical to have people willingly share themselves with you than it is to just be spying on them all the time. I remember one of the ethnographical books that I read. It was this woman who was living with Frisian culture in, I guess in the Netherlands. And I don't know if you're hearing music outside here, because I guess you when you drive your car, you have to have really loud music on. And this is actually, it's All This Love. Yeah, they actually just stopped it right now. But yeah, if you remember that song, who did that song, All This Love? Well, it was DeBarge. DeBarge did All This Love, right? Okay. Anyway, I'm completely getting off track. This person outside completely got me off track here. Anyway, but she was studying the Frisian culture, and there was a person who would come in the middle of the night to take all of the waste away from their outhouses. And it was like kind of this mythical person, and nobody, everybody talked about who it was, but nobody really knew who the person was. And it was kind of it was like kind of a mystery, and she wanted to unlock the mystery. So she set herself up in the middle of the night, got her binoculars and everything, got ready to record. And then she realized, like, what am I doing? Right? This is completely unethical. This person did not ask to be recorded. They do this in the middle of the night, partly because they don't want people to be seeing them. And she just, she pulled the plug, and she realized, like, this is not something that I should be doing. So, from an ethical standpoint there. So I love the idea of the predators, right? Like, as anthropologists, like, using their cloaking device to, like, go to other planets and study people, and then, like, having an argument about it at, like, one of their big anthropological conventions on the predator home planet. You can see, like, them with the big mandibles screaming at each other. How they do that rah thing at each other. Because it's a real heated discussion about, like, how anthropological techniques. It'd be a really, really great idea. I mean, again, I don't know how you make movies out of these ideas, whether it's the engineer or the anthropologist or whatever. But I mean, you could do some really fun stuff with predators, right? Romantic comedies, that kind of thing. So I'm getting way off track here, right? And it's we've chatted enough, and I've got sirens. Maybe this is like the police coming, right, to shut down this segment so we can get on to the second movie. But anyway, wrapping up this first Alien versus Predator. Again, it's not the movie I would have wanted, right? The movie I would have wanted would have been a few predators go to a planet, encounter the aliens, and it's like, we got to get after it, and they fight each other. There'd be no humans involved at all. But I guess you have to have humans with these movies, right? That's like the law when it comes to that kind of thing. It's got to be kind of like, again, like the two big monsters fighting each other. And if that's the case, I think this kind of works in that sense. Again, I also probably could have done without the whole, thousands of years of history of predators, of humans worshiping predators, and then suddenly we forget that they even existed, and it's that part of it too. I probably could have done without that. But overall, I think this is a fun movie. It does what you need it to do, and it was successful enough, right, that it spawns a sequel. And we'll be talking about that sequel here in just a minute here. So we'll take a quick break, and then we come back and we'll talk about Alien vs. Predator Requiem. It's the early 90s in LA. The war on drugs is raging, and Detective John Bainbridge is the LAPD's secret weapon against crime. Former Special Forces in Nam, he's a cop on the edge. When he and his partner Geary uncover a potential human trafficking ring, it doesn't take long before John Bainbridge realizes this thing goes all the way to the top, which doesn't scare him. That just means they'll fall that much harder when he takes them down. Part send-up and part love letter to early 90s action films, Bainbridge will take you back to the golden days of Canon, PM Entertainment, and AIP. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited from Amazon. Follow the link in the podcast description. My newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available now. It follows Don Veazey, who after 20 years has finally made it as a writer, going from an AP English teacher to richer and more famous than he ever could have imagined. In the process, his wife Lois, feeling alienated and resentful of her husband's success, has filed for divorce, forcing Don to move to a house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. With time alone to reflect, he's able to see how his new wealth and fame has affected his life in ways he never expected. Maybe the biggest of these is his new house, which is bigger and nicer than anything he's ever had in his entire life, but the longer he lives there, the more he gets the sense that it might have magical powers. But that can't be right. A house can't have magical powers, can it? Pick up Don's House in the Mountains today. You can find it at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle. All right, we are back, and we are looking at Alien vs. Predator Requiem. So this film comes out 3 years after the first Alien vs. Predator, right? So it comes out in 2007. It's meant to take place immediately after, right? Because it literally picks up where the events of the first or the first Alien vs. Predator leaves off, and it kind of moves here. I didn't see this one in the theater. I missed it, and I ended up seeing it. I think I got it on Netflix later on. So it was really critically panned, if I remember. I think it didn't do well. I think from a critical standpoint, I think that, and it had reasons. We'll get into some of those reasons for why it would have been critically panned. Interesting thing, though, is that it had a higher return on investment than the previous one. So while the previous one was kind of a big, it had like a big opening weekend, and overall grossed a good amount. It was a budget of $60 million, grossed $177 worldwide. This one with a smaller budget of $40 million grossed $130 million worldwide. So a little bit more than 3 times the budget versus the previous one that was just shy of 3 times the budget. So despite the bad opening week, which, I mean, for an opening weekend, it wasn't horrible. It still made $10 million in its opening weekend, which would have been New Year's weekend. It came out in December 30th of 2007 here in the U.S. So I'm trying to think myself. I'm trying to think if that was the New Year's. There was a New Year's where I had my job, and I don't know if it was that one or the next year where I got good and hammered and had to go to work hungover the next day because I was working New Year's. I remember getting out. It was I worked at the kitchen of a retirement community at that time, and I remember having to get Canada Dry out of the vending machines they had there to kind of make my way through the rest of the day there. So I was still burning the candle at both ends there in my late 20s, getting to my early 30s. But now, of course, I remember the last time I drank on New Year's. I don't really drink much at all anymore, which is a little bit nicer for me. Get this a little better. But anyway, we're getting off track on that part there. I'm already it's quieted down outside here, but I'm already finding other ways to get off track. Anyway, so this movie, like I said, it comes out it comes out 3 years after, and it is taking place immediately kind of after. So essentially, we kind of get the ship again where the alien comes out of the Predator, and sort of like an alien Predator hybrid. What I was reading was that because I think in the original story idea was that alien versus predator, that alien predator hybrid kind of ravages the Predator ship, but it wasn't originally supposed to be the main antagonist. The main antagonist was supposed to be just some other aliens that were going to do it. And then they decided to kind of make it this. And then, what happens is that, I think it's supposed to be an alien queen. They don't say whether it's a man or a woman. So they trash the ship. The ship crashes in a small town in Colorado, in Gunnison County, Colorado. But before the predators on the ship die, they send a distress signal out to their home planet, and a guy, one of the old predators there, picks up the message and says, "Okay, I'm going to go out and clean up this mess." And it's interesting because the producers of the film, the filmmakers, they referred to this predator as the Wolf because he's like Winston Wolfe, right? Who goes in and cleans things up. Funny story with Winston Wolfe. I remember he took his coffee, a lot of cream and a lot of sugar, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So of course, Pulp Fiction came out in like '94, I think. So I was like just getting into coffee drinking at that time, just going to cafes and things like that. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do lots of cream, lots of sugar. That sounds good to me. And my friends would joke that it would almost be like molasses at the bottom of the cup because I had too much cream and too much sugar. So one day, I don't know if it was a year or two after that, I was in like study hall or something. We had a substitute that day, and it was this teacher named Mr. Todd, who was kind of smaller roly-poly guy who had like a fanny pack and all that stuff. And when he heard that I did my coffee, lots of cream, lots of sugar, he's like, "Well, when you get to be a man like me, you'll drink it black." And I was like, "Well, I'm a man now. I'll drink it black." And I've drank it black ever since. It's always how I drink my coffee now. I usually drink it black with ice cubes in it. But anyway, so yeah, Winston Wolfe initially influenced my coffee decision, and then of course this other substitute teacher influenced it now. And now I just, what I discovered actually about drinking it black that makes it great is you don't have to keep cream in the house. You don't have to, when you go to other people's houses and they're like, oh, we don't have any cream, it doesn't matter. You just, you don't need anything. You just need the coffee, and you're all set. So it is better drinking it black. I think for people out there who do cream and sugar, you should work yourself into black. It's a better way to do your coffee because you don't need anything when you're out on the road and you're traveling or anything like that. You don't have to worry about it. You just get the coffee and you're all set. Also, too, right? Like if you do like when I used to go hiking with my buddy, we'd go to Dunkin' Donuts, and if I got like a black iced coffee, I could let it sit in the car. And when I came back, it was still good to drink it, right? But if you had milk in there, you don't know how that would go. So yeah, just my advice there. Black coffee is the better way to go. But anyway, so we get the wolf, right? The wolf shows up at the planet. But the problem with this movie, one of the big problems that I have with this movie. So if my complaint about the first movie was that we had people in it and they kind of bogged things down and I didn't need people in it, this movie has more people in it, right? This movie kind of does almost like your classic like horror movie thing where you get these characters that have backstories and things going on in their lives. And actually, when I read about the production of this movie, I read that actually these characters were supposed to have even deeper backstories, and they cut the backstory. So like we have this character Dallas, who's just getting out of jail, who's getting out of prison. He gets picked up by the sheriff who was his old friend who also caused trouble with him. And then he's got a younger brother, Ricky, who's getting into trouble with some kids in school who give him a hard time. And so we've got that backstory. Well, I found out that backstory was supposed to be deeper, that Ricky and Dallas were supposed to have a dad who worked in an oil rig and just sent them money home, so they were fending for themselves, and that Ricky got into trouble and Dallas took the rap for him and did 3 years in jail for it. They cut that piece out. And then we have Rico Islesworth, who is coming home from serving in the army. She comes home. Her husband's there, and her daughter. The daughter almost doesn't want to see her, because the daughter's missed her and feels weird around her. I read that there was supposed to be a bigger story going there where the husband had actually cheated on her while she was in the army and was filing for divorce, and that maybe he like moves out, right, and she's there with him. So there's more stuff going on with these characters that they kind of cut out of the film, which I think the movie was better for them cutting it out, but I don't know that we needed any of it, right? But again, we have to have it, right? We have to have these humans doing stuff. And I mean, essentially what happens is once the aliens kind of take over, it's like little bits of things happening here and there. People are getting killed, people getting skinned by, they're either getting killed by the aliens or the predators killing people and skinning them. And so when they always say that the predator skins people alive. And I guess that actually, originally in this movie, that was supposed to have been the case. That like when they do the autopsy, they were supposed to say that like he was, he's in so much pain that he screamed so loud that he ruptured his vocal cords or something. And they decided that's too dark. We're going to take that out. But in the movie, he's killed. The predator kills him and then skins him. And they're like, oh, he was skinned alive. It's like, how do you even know that? How do you, it's like he did it after he was killed. But anyway. So the predator's killing people, the aliens going around killing people, and then they kind of meet. And as they're meeting, the whole town is getting destroyed. This poor sheriff, who's played by John Ortiz. You may remember John Ortiz as the baddie from Fast and Furious. So he's here. And so he's trying to hold everything together. Dallas is trying to help him out. Suddenly, Rico Islesworth shows up with her daughter because her husband gets murdered by one of the aliens, and she's able to escape. So they kind of band together, and they're trying to make it out of the town alive. Then we got Robert Joy, a character actor who's like playing this Colonel Stevens character, and they get in touch with him, and he's like, oh yeah, just go to this like whatever place, and because they call him the National Guard. And the National Guard gets wiped out by the aliens. The aliens just they make quick work of them. And so this Robert Joy, Colonel Stevens, played by Robert Joy. He's like saying, oh yeah, just go to the middle of town and you'll be good there. And so Rachel Ellsworth, who's been in the military, is like, this doesn't sound right. There's something about this isn't working. So she's like, let's go to the hospital where there's a helicopter. We can fly that to get out of here. Well, Ortiz as the sheriff is like, no, I trust this Colonel Stevens. I think he's got our best interests at heart. So they split up, and we get like kind of this one last group here with Rico Ellsworth, her daughter, Dallas with his brother, and the brother's girlfriend, who and another guy, I think it was with them. They end up getting killed off, and so it's just Dallas and his brother, Kelly and her Rico Ellsworth's character's name is Kelly. Rico Ellsworth and her daughter, and they fly off. And at the same time, Colonel Stevens blows up the town, right? The old nuclear weapon thing, which is interesting, right? Because in the previous movies, right, and all the previous, so in the first one, obviously, the Predator blows up the location, right? Kind of just blows everything up, and Schwarzenegger just barely makes it out alive. And the second one, nothing gets blown up, right? But Glover barely makes it out because the ship takes off, right? And that just blows soot all over him and all of that. And then in the last one, in Alien versus Predator, the Predator blows up the pyramid, right? So Predators like to blow stuff up. That's their kind of thing. So the fact that it's us blowing it up, it's almost like, it's you see, you couldn't see the Predator, the wolf there. He's getting blown up while he's having his final fight with the Predator alien, the Pred alien, the hybrid character. They're having their final fight, and they get blown up at the same time everybody else is getting blown up by the atomic bomb that's dropped on this town. But I don't know. It would have been kind of funny if he had the one single tear as the bomb was coming down. Like, oh boy, those humans have finally gotten it together. They this is they're people after my own heart here. But then we don't get anything that. I mean, the other thing too is with that kind of an ending, right? We don't actually get to see the Predator defeat the Pred alien, right? It's the bomb that takes care of everything. So it's kind of a weird ending. It would have been nice to see the Predator take care of business. I mean, it's almost like we get this idea of the Predator as Winston Wolfe, but as the cleaner who's going around fixing everything and cleaning everything up because of the mess that's being, it was created by everybody else before that. But it's never fully realized, which is a shame. It's kind of too bad. And the other thing, of course, we have all these stories going on, and they're also never quite realized, right? They're just kind of there. I mean, Rico Ellsworth's character had the potential to be the best one, and again, it would have fit again with the mold that we're seeing with the different protagonists, right? Where she's biracial, she's part Japanese, I believe. For her character, for her as a woman, again, a person of color, to play the hero in this, I think would have been really cool, right? To see again, to kind of keep working in that vein. But it's weird how to explain it. She's like this weird, like half hero. I don't know how to explain it. She's and I was looking it up. She's only actually one quarter Japanese, so she's not full Jap. She's not like half Japanese, like I was thinking. But anyway, but I don't know. There was this idea that like she's supposed to be this woman like lead actress who's like really kind of getting after it, but we also have this Dallas character who's doing a lot of this kind of stuff too. So it's like they're splitting the difference, and her character just like, it's like we see her and then she disappears. We kind of get into this whole thing about the daughter not trusting her because she's been gone all this time, but it's not really, so then the next scene the aliens come and kill the husband, and so then she's running off, and we get the badassery. But we could have used more badassery, right? We could have, and again, by splitting the difference between her and this Dallas character who's played by Stephen Pascal, because they had to split the difference there, it kind of diminished both of them, right? And I think for a Predator, an Alien Predator movie, right, or Aliens versus Predator movie here, every other one before this had a very clear, defined hero, right? And even though, like for example, in the Predator, right? We got Carl Weathers there, right? And we've got, the rest of the team, Jesse the Body Ventura, Billy Duke, those characters are all there. Really, right? Schwarzenegger is the hero in that. And then in part two, right, Danny Glover's got other people helping him, right? Obviously Gary Busey's doing his thing there with Adam Baldwin. But then we've got Bill Paxton, Maria Conchita Alonso. But ultimately, right, Danny Glover is the hero there. And then in the previous one, right, the previous one to this, right, even though you've got Lance Henriksen kind of leading things, you've got, Colin Salmon, you've got, Tommy Flanagan, you've got Raul Bova there, you've got all these kind of different characters there that are people that are sort of a part of it. It's ultimately Sanaa Lathan, right, who is the lead. She's the one that they're the one we focus on. We may go to these little sideline things, just like we did in the previous films of watching the other people getting killed, but ultimately it was her movie. And this one here, because they split the difference, and we don't even get as much about her family and their backstory. I think it could have just been like they could have taken the whole thing out with Dallas and his younger brother Ricky, and Ricky hooking up with this girl Jessie that he went to high school with, and all of that kind of stuff. It could have been just a small little piece of it, but it didn't have to be as big of a part of it as it was. And they could have really focused on her and let her be the lead. And I think it would have made things a little bit more consistent and made things work a little bit better. Because I think that was one complaint that, at least that I had. The biggest complaint that this movie has, and I completely got this complaint, is there's a lot of shaky cam and it's dark. And it's almost interesting because they wanted to go dark. So that the filmmakers were the Strauss brothers, Colin and Greg Strauss. And one of the things they were talking about was the fact that because they were working on a tighter budget, right? So this movie had $40 million to work with as opposed to $60 million from the previous movie. On the tighter budget, they said that having it be darker like that allowed them to cover up some of the shortfalls in the budget, which I can see that, right? That makes sense, right? You got to find ways to work around that. But it made it difficult. Like the biggest thing for me was when the Predator would be fighting aliens, it was hard to tell who was who, especially when he's fighting the Pred alien, right? That was the hardest one because it was like, because they look similar. And so when it's dark and it's shaky cam, it's hard to see who's who in that environment. And I imagine, being in the theater, it probably wasn't much easier than it is watching it on a home device. I would say if you're on a flight and you've got your phone and you're looking to watch a movie on your phone for a flight, this is one I wouldn't watch. I think you'd have trouble paying attention to what's going on with this. And so I think that's something to consider with this movie. You'd have trouble with it because it would be between the shaky cam and the darkness. You'd have trouble understanding what's going on. It's like interesting. Like the Marvel movies are great for that. Like Marvel movies are great to watch on your phone because they're so big and colorful. And again, they almost like work perfectly with especially if you've got like an iPhone with the resolution of the iPhone screen. Those are great, especially if you've seen them before, right? If you've seen Iron Man before, it's a great 2-hour time killer when you get a flight. So it's, but this movie is definitely not that. And I think that was like the biggest complaint, right, that people had about this movie is it was hard to see. I think for me that added story element was tough. The other thing is it was dark, not just from a screen view, but it was dark just as a story. And there were definitely some complaints. And I heard that they cut stuff. Like I talked about that the deputy who gets killed by the Predator and gets skinned after the fact, that they had cut a scene where the autopsy is saying oh yeah, he was skinned alive and he screamed so loud that he ruptured his larynx or whatever, his vocal cords. They cut that part out, right? So they're just seeing... You just see the autopsy and they're like, oh, who would do this to poor Deputy Ray? So it was going to be darker, but there's one dark scene in particular at a hospital where there's pregnant women. I mean, because what happens is the Predator and the Pred alien they fight at a electric a power station. They kind of knock out the power in the whole area, and so the hospital's working on backup generators, and the aliens show up at the hospital. And they notice that there's pregnant women in the maternity ward, and so what they do, the queen has this ability to use her mouth to implant eggs through the women's mouths, and then they have all these alien eggs in their belly, and I think that was a hard thing for people to watch, right? To see pregnant women getting killed that way, pregnant. It's complete opposite, right, from what you get with the Predator, right? In the second Predator movie where he's about to kill Maria Conchita Alonso, oh, she's pregnant, I'm going to leave her alone. Whereas the aliens are oh, sweet, pregnant women, this is great. They can, our little alien babies can feed on the fetus, It's just a really dark, cold, nasty concept. And I think it was one that for a movie that's supposed to be goofy and a lot of fun, that's a little bit tough, right? And I think that's the thing, with this movie compared to the previous one is that this one was trying to be kind of more hardcore horror, and I think with the Predator movies, you want to almost have a fun element to it. You want kind of a goofy send up kind of feel to it, and this was it was definitely a murder spree, right? It was people getting killed left and right. Anybody could be killed at any moment in this movie, and I think yes, that can be fun for sure. I think, pregnant women, that's an area where you kind of want to be careful, right? That's not always a great one there. I've seen that sometimes with, pregnant women being kidnapped, things like that in movies and things like that. And it doesn't always play well, right? There's sort of a hierarchy, I think, when it comes to that kind of thing. First off, animals. They were going to have a dog Because there's a dog there's homeless people that live in the sewers who get face hugged and end up having aliens come out of them, and they have a dog, and there was an idea that they were gonna have the dog get face hugged and have this sort of like dog alien hybrid come out of the dog, and they left that alone. I think that's a good idea because I think again animals in general, for me, it's you saw like I was sympathetic with the poor alien queen in the first Alien versus Predator. So for me, animals I always feel like should be off limits no matter what. But it's a definitely that's kind of the first thing in the hierarchy, right? You killing off animals, that's always tough. Kids, right? I mean, early scene, right? You've got a father and son out hunting, and they both get face hugged, and the poor kid, right, has the alien comes shooting out of his chest. That's tough, right? Kids. So the movie's already starting to go on a dark path when it kills a kid off early on. At that point, like, okay, this thing is going to kind of be an all bets are off kind of deal if they're killing kids. They do that, right? They kill a kid immediately. And then the pregnant women, right? And pregnant women's kind of like the third one. Elderly, right? Elderly. It's interesting with the elderly ones because sometimes you get a kick out of it. Sometimes it's bad, right? Because again, we're talking about defenseless people that you don't want to see getting harmed. But there's sort of that hierarchy, right? As you go down, right? Of who can be killed off in a movie. It's hard, when you see like kids and their parents are getting killed off, even though the kids live on after. That's not an easy thing either. Again, it's hard to find people to kill off in movies. I mean, even when you're just killing off, the soldiers, right? When they're getting killed off, it's like they probably have families and things like that too. So again, you got to kill somebody off in these movies, right? Some people have to get killed off. But I think that kind of that trifecta there is one that if you're a movie and you're going to kill anybody off in that trifecta, you should be careful of it. One of the things I think for movies, sometimes for me, is that when they kill animals off, I think that's sometimes a sign of the director and screenwriter and how they feel about animals, which I think is an important thing because I think they sometimes see it as like, well, better to kill an animal off than to kill a human, right? For me, that's always a dicey thing. Animals are defenseless, and I think you got to kind of leave them alone. So this movie went dark in a lot of different ways, and I think I don't know because I watched this one by myself. It would have been interesting to see what my friends would have thought of that, especially like the pregnant moms, getting having eggs stuffed down their throats by the pred alien, and then being like kind of cocooned and lying there, and it's a rough deal. It's a rough kind of thing there. So, out of the four that I've watched so far for this, I would say you could kind of rank them in order of when they came out. I think, 1 and 2 are much closer, and then 3 is a little further down, and this is further down than that. I think just off the top of my head, I can say Prey. I like Prey better than this. I have to see the Predators and the Predator again to kind of say, how I kind of feel about those other ones. A few other things about this one. That I almost forgot. Like one, it takes place in a part of Colorado that I've been to before. It's shot in Vancouver, so I've never been to Vancouver. I'd love to go to Vancouver at some point. If anybody listening is in Vancouver and wants to fly me out there, it'd be great. I'd love to take in a Canucks game and get saved. I remember my professor in school. We had to go to an anthropology convention in San Francisco. And she was saying like, oh, it's too bad it's not in Vancouver, because in her mind, Vancouver was the best. And I think she had to testify at a trial, and the trial, it was in Canada, and she was hoping it would be held in Vancouver, but it was held in Toronto, and she was disappointed that she couldn't go to Vancouver. So, it's interesting when you think of the hierarchy of best cities in North America. That's kind of what I've heard a lot, is that, like, I've never been to Vancouver, but people say like sort of like Seattle is up there, Portland. A lot of people used to like Portland. Portland's kind of fallen out of favor, I think, but Seattle, I like San Francisco better than any of those, so it's possible that I might go to Vancouver and be disappointed, but it's a city in North America I've always wanted to go to and haven't had a chance to go to yet. And so that's where this movie was shot. But it takes place in Gunnison County, Colorado, which is kind of near, from what I was reading, it's like near like the Maroon Bells Wilderness and the Collegiate Peak Wilderness, which my friend and I have been in those areas. So like Maroon Bells, I've seen Maroon Bells. I haven't hiked them. I think my buddy hiked one of the Maroon Bells, which they are extremely difficult peaks to hike. I think one of them has class 4 scrambling, or maybe both of them do. But and then the Collegiate Peaks, what that means is they're mountains in Colorado that are named after colleges. So you've got Harvard Peak, Dartmouth, Princeton. I think there's a Pennsylvania. I don't know if it's all just Ivy League peaks. I don't remember. But I haven't done any of those. My friend did some of those when I was hiking, because when I go go out hiking with him, the couple times that I've been out to Colorado hiking with him, the altitude gets to me, and I can't do. I think actually it was Princeton maybe that he was doing, and we stayed overnight at 12,000 feet. And I woke up the next morning because I was going to do the peak with him. I couldn't move without running out of breath, and he was like, I'll just do it, let me just run up and do it. But then we that second trip we did out there, we kind of drove all over Colorado. So I did like Four Corners region, stuff like that. So out of all the states in the US, it's one that I've been to like a lot of it. I've seen a lot of it. And so Gunnison County's out there, kind of more towards the west, near areas like Leadville, and like I said, the Collegiate Peaks, Maroon Bells. Aspen would be kind of in that area as well. And so, but because the movie is shot in Vancouver, the Pacific Northwest looks different from Colorado, and it is one of those things you can kind of feel it when you're watching the movie, that like this doesn't feel like Colorado. It's always an interesting thing, and I heard that originally the movie was supposed to take place in Texas, which I guess maybe they thought, if we're going to shoot in Vancouver, Colorado's closer to Vancouver than Texas, which is true, right? This looks closer to, you can believe it more as Colorado than you can as Texas, but it's still, you could have also had it been taking place in Washington. I don't know if you had to have it take place in Colorado, you could have had it take place in, I don't know, wherever in Washington, Everett, Washington, someplace near, Spokane or something like that. They could have done something like that, and it would have been even closer, right, to Vancouver. So it's always interesting why they make those decisions. We talk about this like when I have Scott Murphy from All 90s Action All the Time on, when we're talking about Seagal movies that take place in Eastern, or they're shot in Eastern Europe but are supposed to take place in France, and it's like, well, why? Why does it need to take place in Paris when we all know it's Bucharest? You just make it Bucharest, and it would have been, they probably could have done the same thing here. Maybe you don't want it to take place in Canada, though. I think that would be kind of funny too, right? To have it be Canadian, right? I guess as Americans, right? We don't care about any other place other than America, and maybe there's like an idea that there's a cap, right? That if the movie took place in Vancouver or outside of Vancouver, right, that there would be a cap as far as Americans would go to watch it. I guess maybe that's true. Maybe there's enough Americans to be like, I'm not watching that as Canadians, I don't know, but I think it would have been nice if, I think maybe just to make it even a little bit closer to that, I think would have been better. All right, so we're close to wrapping up here. So just a bit on the legacy. They were going to make a third movie. So remember in the first one, right, we talked about how we've got Lance Henriksen, sorry, drawing a blank on his name. Lance Henriksen, right, is representing the Wayland Corporation, right? And as we know, right, that the Wayland, right, it's Wayland and Yutani, right, are the two companies that work together here. And so we get Francoise, I don't know if I have to say her name correctly, Francoise Yip, or people have probably said her name, have said it and they know it, but she's a popular actress, right, who's been in other stuff before. So she's in this at the end, and what happens is one of the characters gets a Predator gun. Dallas gets the Predator's gun, and he's walking around with it shooting aliens. And then when they escape at the end, they're caught by, or the National Guard catch, or the military catches them. And there's almost, I guess originally the plan was when the military caught them, they killed them so that they couldn't tell everybody about what happened. In this case, they either leave it open, or we just kind of know that that's not what's happening. But either way, they catch them and they take the gun away from him, and the Colonel character, Robert Joy, he takes that gun to Francoise Yip, and she makes a comment about it, right? Something along the lines of like, well, the world isn't, or our planet or something is not ready for this, right? Something along those lines. And he's like, well, it's not for this planet, right? It's meaning like, no, we're supposed to be, taking this out to outer space, right? That's the plan, is we're supposed to, which is sort of, I guess, giving us the sense that eventually what's coming is, the next, the first Alien movie. And I guess it would be like 100 years, right? Which it kind of would make sense, right? So that it would take 100 years to kind of develop the technology to be able to fly out to space like that. But this is kind of the start of it, right? I guess the idea is that the Yutani they reverse engineer the gun and use it, and I guess the plan was with this sort of the stinger here at the end, where Robert Joy gives the gun to Ms. Yutani. That was going to be the lead to the third movie, and the third movie was going to be the one that would really build us up to Alien. But because of the critic, and it was really the critical response to this, it wasn't the money, because the movie made the money it was supposed to, but the critical response was what caused them to go, not do a third movie. It would have been interesting to see if what they would have done with that third movie, how that would have, how they would have kept building up to the idea of of the aliens and getting us to that first Alien movie. It would have absolutely crushed Ridley Scott's sensibilities to know that like this franchise was building his franchise, right? That he was doing. I would have loved it. I think it would have been fantastic. But it's amazing. It's very interesting that it was the critical response that caused them to not want to make this movie, make a third movie, when the movie made as much money as it did. Because usually that's not, I mean, one of the things is this movie, just like the previous one, wasn't screened for critics. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So it's not like if you watch like back then, it would have been Ebert and Roper. When you watch Ebert and Roper, they only do movies on there. They would only do movies on that show that were screened for critics. They would talk about that. They would say, like, because they said people would ask them, like, well, why don't you do movies like, what was it, White Chicks, the movie with the Wayans brothers? They're like, yeah, we don't do White Chicks because they don't screen White Chicks for critics. And they were saying at that time the big thing was that Nicolas Cage was making new movies, and they weren't being screened for critics. And he's like, we've never seen anything like this before, that a star of the magnitude of Nicolas Cage is making movies that we aren't getting, screeners for. But I think what happens, I think sometimes if it's not screened, I don't know exactly how it works when you're a film critic. If maybe you have an expense account and you go see a movie and you can expense it to write your review or something like that. Maybe that's what they do if the movie's not screened for critics. But yeah, so both of these movies weren't screened for critics, but I guess, I think it's got like a 22% Rotten Tomato score or something like that. But it seems like that you think that part of it wouldn't matter enough if it makes the kind of money it makes, I mean, you get it when it's a complete flop, right? You get it when it's Battlefield Earth, right? I mean, John Travolta claimed that Battlefield Earth made over $100 million. It didn't, right? And the proof was there. Like he exaggerated these numbers. He knew he failed on that movie. He knew that movie was a horrible disaster, and he didn't want to really own it as a horrible disaster. And so he made up this idea that the movie made $100 million when it didn't. This movie did make $100 million. It legitimately did. It legitimately made over 3 times its budget back. So there was earning potential here in this franchise. But yeah, they pulled the plug. I do wonder as well, because right then we end up getting from here, right, is we get Prometheus. And I do wonder too what that, Prometheus comes out in 2012, I believe, right? 5 years after this. So they go in that direction, right, of moving the story. So, and Ridley Scott immediately takes to, with this movie, with Prometheus, to remove any connection that his Alien franchise could possibly have with the Alien versus Predator films, and Fox is good with it, right? Fox wants him to do that. They let him do that, and so that kind of eliminates these movies from canon, whatever. But also it eliminates the idea of making a sequel, right? Because again, I think they were afraid of they were afraid of hurting its sensibilities. Now the thing to keep in mind is that this movie, the Prometheus, it had a budget of $130 million. Worldwide, it grossed over $400 million, right? So you get a good amount of money there, right? So it's but for that kind of a budget, right, it's still barely making 3 times its budget. The same way that the Alien versus Predator movie barely made 3 times its budget. So it's like, okay, so Alien versus Predator, right? Just kind of doing it out here. Had a budget of I think $40 million. So you could make 3 Alien versus Predators, right, for the same price as you made, for the same price that you made Prometheus, and you'd earn the same amount of money roughly, right? Because 3 of them, right, for 120 million would get you 390 million. So I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks like, because it's less of a risk, right? If you make a movie for 40 million and it doesn't do well, right, you're not out as much as you are when you make that $130 million movie and it doesn't do well. Now, granted, it did well enough, right? Prometheus did well enough, but it feels like it shouldn't have done well enough. It didn't do well enough to obviate an Alien versus Predator franchise, I guess is what I would say. But that's kind of the direction that they go here, right? That they're done with Alien versus Predator, in part because of the critical response, in part because Ridley Scott comes back in, and they let him create his own origin story for Aliens. Now, one of the things we talked about is that the Predator movies haven't said one way or the other if these movies count or don't count for the canon or the storyline or whatever. I kind of feel like with the way Predator works, it's a little bit less like up its own ass, that it would be more willing to be cool with the Predator movies. Though, to be fair, I'm saying less up its own ass. James Cameron liked the first Alien versus Predator, so he's not that up his own ass. But yeah, the fact that Ridley Scott just couldn't be bothered, right? It just it's like, all right, I don't know. Yeah, you get to that point where you're like, okay, whatever. I don't know. As we kind of move forward here, because now at this point too, from the standpoint of the Predator franchise, right? Not only so once Ridley Scott decides he's going to come in here and do his he's going to come in and do Prometheus. The same time, right? They decide to do Predators with 3 years after this. So they're kind of they're also going away from the Alien versus Predator idea, and they're going back into just straight up Predator movies. I think it's good enough, at least, that we're not losing. That we're not losing them both altogether. I think it would have been easy enough, at least with the Predators, to kind of lose them again like we did for 14 years. With Alien, at least we had a couple movies in between. With Predator, it was 14 years between the second Predator film and Alien versus Predator. So the fact that we didn't go quite as long, that was only a few years later that we got this new Predator movie. I kind of appreciated that. I kind of like that. It'll be good. It'll be interesting when we get into these movies here and kind of finish this thing up, which we will in a couple of weeks here. We'll do these last movies here. I'm excited to watch these. Predators I've seen, and Prey, of course, I've seen. I haven't seen The Predator. We'll see. It's also, again, we're in this thing here where we can't use numbers, right? For whatever reason, we're done using numbers for sequels, we can't call it Predator 3, we can't call it Predator 4. It's got to be Predators and The Predator, right? And Prey, can't be Predator 5, even though it's a sequel. It's like whatever. Anyway, but we're gonna do those final sequels here and wrap this thing up in a couple weeks. So. Anyway, thank you everybody for listening. I'm getting to that rambling point. It has quieted down quite a bit outside here, so at least that's a good thing. But I'm definitely, I think I've kind of hit all the points I wanted to hit on both of these films. Went a little bit longer than I was expecting to as well. So as we're wrapping up, I'm just going to do some plugs here. Of course, dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. That's the site. That's where you can find links to everything there. The podcasts, novels, letterbox, all of those kinds of things. With the novels, again, it is Indie April. So get out there and support your indie creatives. My newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, that's available on Kindle and in paperback on Amazon. Link is in the podcast description. Again, I mentioned that character Milton. He's not in the movie, he's not in the book a lot. He's only in the first chapter, but he is an interesting character. The main character interacts with, because it's sort of like the main character used to know him as a guy who wrote UFO stuff when the main character was struggling as an author himself, and now the main character's so rich and famous at this point, he almost has like survivor's guilt, and he wants to help Milton out, and then realizes like, no, it's too much. And then Milton kind of gets in the way when the main character's hooking up with a woman in town. So it's a really interesting part of the story there. So if you haven't picked up Don's House in the Mountain, definitely check that out. Also, Bainbridge, my short action novel, available on Kindle and paperback as well. But yeah, we'll wrap this up here. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk again soon. Bye everyone.
with you. There ain't moving